Oh boy. You may have noticed that my shop is an absolute disaster. And I've got to do something about it because it's driving me crazy. I am prepared to take action. Drastic action, if needed. I've come to the conclusion that this shop will never be organized. It's not that I have too much stuff, which I do, or that I'm a slob, which I am. The problem is I just have too many interests and not enough focus. I took a psychology class in college, a couple of psychology classes. I don't understand people, but I find psychology kind of fascinating. Anyway, we took a personality test, kind of an informal one, and I remember I scored in the 98th percentile for something called openness to experience. It's part of the 5-factor model. Anyway, that is not a good thing. You want to be kind of in the middle, around the 50th percentile. If you're too high or too low in any category, it's usually a problem. That is certainly the case for me. By the way, if you're watching this video, there's a pretty good chance that you are also high in openness. We tend to be sort of drawn towards each other. How do you set up a shop to do automotive repair, equipment repair, fabrication, machining, CNC machining, prototype engineering, electronics, carpentry, woodworking, leatherworking, knife making? I mean, there are places that do all of those things, but you're talking about companies with hundreds of employees and hundreds of thousands of square feet. It's probably too much to ask from a 3,000 square foot building occupied by one person. I think we're going to start with the hardest part. We'll just rip the Band-Aid off and get rid of some stuff. I got rid of the 2 desks that were here on the shop floor. I'm going to get rid of these 2 metal bolt bins. I've had these forever. They work fine. The problem is I can't ever make up my mind what I want to put in them. So I end up having to move things around and relabel them, and that's kind of a pain. So I got a smoking deal on these plastic bins. I bought like 300 of them for $50. I'm going to move everything into these bins and then put those bins on some shelves and put those shelves up in the storage area above the new office. These cabinets can also go upstairs. All of this stuff was upstairs before, and it's going to go back up there. This whole pallet and this whole pallet is going to go. I think I'm going to get rid of the tire machines. I bet I haven't mounted and balanced more than a dozen tires in the last year. I really don't like doing it, and I don't use them enough to justify the space that they take up. They're not really worth anything, so I'm not going to be able to cash out, but I would like to have this space more than I would like to have these tire machines. All right, that solves that problem. How does one person have this much hardware? This is just the inch-size socket head cap screws. That's about 1/5 of my total hardware hoard. It's kind of a sad story with the cap screws. Most of those are 10 years old. And I mean, there's sizes that I use, but there are certainly some that I have never touched in 10 years. It's part of a series of miscalculations that I made when I started my own business. My last job, my last real job, my main task was programming CNC machines and designing tools and fixtures to hold cast parts. And I thought, when I decided to go on my own, that I could get that kind of work and do it myself. And I knocked on a lot of doors, and I think in the maybe 5 years or so that I had my own machine shop, I made probably less than a dozen fixtures. So yeah, didn't really pan out like a lot of things. I don't know, I mean, it's good to have cap screws, but I probably don't need that many. I can't bring myself to get rid of them. No, I did not get evicted. I decided to use the nuclear option. The shop's not going to clean itself, so I moved everything outside and just ripped off the Band-Aid of shop cleanup. Man, I've got a lot of stuff. So much stuff. We're going to have to think long and hard about how much of that stuff comes back in the building. We've done the white paint. Looks pretty good. Now we need the gray at the bottom. But I found a few problems. There's a damaged spot in the wall here. It looks kind of like the front end of a Pontiac Vibe. Not entirely sure how that happened. But there's a bigger problem. Remember when Elon Musk bought Twitter for $60 billion or whatever he paid for it? And then the first thing he did was he stopped paying rent. And I couldn't figure out why a $60 billion company was renting office space. I kind of understand it now. Commercial real estate is a horrible investment. This building, I've been in here for 5 years, and I've spent almost $50,000 on this building. I replaced the roof. We had to rebuild the office and storage area. I've had to fix pipes, and there was a big problem with the siding. Water would literally just run in when it would rain. I had to fix the driveway. It never ends. And last summer, I fixed the floor. We put grout underneath the concrete and raised up a low spot in the middle. You can still kind of see there's a hump here where now there's a high spot. But it looks to me like there's a pretty bad low spot right in here. We better do something about that because I don't want it to get away from me. I don't know if you can see, but the sheeting's actually bowed out right here, right underneath the window. It's actually bowed out a little bit here too. So I think what's going on is the floor is high here and high there, and it's kind of low between the 2 points. And most of the weight of the building is sitting on the high spots. And it's still pretty straight, I think, along here. But if I don't do something about it, the building's going to sag. I'm starting to think this shop might have been built on an ancient Indian burial ground or something. It's like a pet cemetery situation. I don't know. It sure seems cursed to me. I've been busy. About 40 hours of work has been done since the last time I picked up the camera. Let me show you the progress we've made. How did you spend your entire Labor Day weekend? Here's how I spent mine. This wall now matches this wall for the first time in 5 years. White on top, gray on the bottom, separated by a poorly painted blue stripe. You cannot mask OSB. But from a distance, it looks just fine. We also have electrical. That sub panel was there. I ran that about a year ago. I installed the phase converter and a 3-phase panel. I also ran drops for the TIG welder, the MIG welder, and over in the corner, the plasma table. I also installed air lines. I bought 2 of these rapid air kits about 3 years ago, and I finally installed them. They're pretty nice. The only real problem is this is aluminum, plastic-coated aluminum tubing. It comes in a roll, and you spend more time trying to straighten it than you do actually installing it. But I think it looks pretty decent. I've got 6 drops. It actually only covers about half the shop, but I think it's going to be just fine. I even installed a filter and regulator, which, believe it or not, I've never had before. I even installed an air hose reel, which I also bought about 3 years ago. Anyway, we are ready to start moving stuff back in, which means we need to figure out where we want to put things, and that is always the challenge. This is the tentative plan. We're going to have a welding area, a machining area, a repair area, a long-term project and storage area, and then sort of a small woodworking and assembly area. The big thing I want is to concentrate all the really dirty stuff in one spot and then try to sort of curtain that off and contain all the dust and the grinding and the welding and all that stuff. Hopefully I can keep the rest of the shop a lot cleaner. It may not work out this way. We'll have to get the stuff in here and just kind of see how it feels. Here's a fun fact. Do you know why we have 3D CAD modeling, computer-aided design? It's actually because of the US Navy. So during the Cold War, they were trying to find a faster way to design submarines. And before CAD, really the only way to do it was to build a full-scale, one-to-one mock-up of the entire interior of the submarine, kind of like a movie set. And if you've ever been on a submarine, you'll understand why. It's tight quarters, and without that mock-up, there was no way to know whether all the equipment was going to fit where they wanted it, and more importantly, whether all the squishy humans were going to fit where they needed them to. Well, the fancy engineering term for that is packaging, and it's a huge part of the design process. We're getting there. I'm pretty happy with the welding area, but I don't like this setup. I don't know what it is, but it just doesn't feel quite right. The mill is it's kind of awkward. It's got this weird triangular shape. I really want to keep the big machines against the wall because it just makes wiring so much easier. But I'm going to move things around and see if I like it better. All right, the bad news is this is taking forever. We're now 60 hours into this shop cleanup project. The good news is it's starting to come together. I am very happy with the machine tool layout. I think it's going to work. Unfortunately, we've had 5 days of just spectacular weather. Not a cloud in the sky. But that appears to be about to change. So we've got about 2 hours, I think, before it starts to rain. I need to get everything back inside. But before I do that, I want to get this car outside. It's been in my shop. Actually, it's been in that spot for 5 months, something like that. I haven't been able to use my lift that whole time, which is not very handy. So it's going out today, and we'll move it back in when we're ready to finish it up. Yeah, it was getting a little sketchy trying to pull the shelves when they were loaded. So I dumped everything off of this one. Now I get to put it all back. Okay. It is the morning of day 9. I've got well over 100 hours in this project, and that's not counting the entire 12-hour day I spent sorting through all the nuts and bolts. I have moved every single thing in this shop except for the steel rack at least once. I used an entire tank of propane on the forklift, and that normally lasts 6 months. It's been a long 9 days. Our tour begins upstairs. I know everybody thought I was crazy when I used those I-joists on 12-inch centers, and they were right, but this is why. It is absolutely jam-packed with all my stuff. So fasteners on this wall, inch bolts there, metric bolts there, socket head cap screws. This is dowel pins and roll pins and electrical terminals, set screws, cotter pins, sheet metal screws, more miscellaneous hardware, some bearings and seals. That's infrastructure stuff. Over here is hoses and hose clamps, O-rings, electrical, filters, chemicals, oil, coolant, paint, more infrastructure stuff. That's all my electrical stuff for wiring up machines in the shop. This is like screws and nails. And then I have a ton of stuff, just stuff like this that I don't really know what to do with. You know, those are tapered dowel pins. Those are shaft collars. Heavy duty washers, shaft couplings, like special hardware that I ordered for a project or salvaged somewhere, and I just can't make myself throw it away. But at the same time, am I ever going to use it? I really don't know. These are oiling system metering units, giant springs for a winch project that I was going to do a long time ago, never got done. Anyway, there's still some work to be done up here. I've got a few totes that need to be emptied out. I don't really know what to do with these cabinets. There's not really a good way to put them on a shelf. That's a box full of bolts that needs to be sorted. But for the most part, this is pretty well situated. I'm pretty happy with it. I'm really digging the zones. This is the dusty but also clean zone, if that makes sense. Got the laser cutter, CNC router, and then a bunch of woodworking tools. I don't do a lot of woodworking, especially not, fine woodworking. But the problem I always have is everything in the shop is oily and greasy, and that doesn't mix well with wood or leather. So I think the answer is to have a dedicated area for it. The machining area, hopefully, is self-explanatory. And then the welding area. So I've got to have forklift access to the upstairs, the plasma table, the welding bench, and the bandsaw. So my thought was to kind of arrange them to have an area that they could share that is forklift accessible. I did order a second curtain, and I'm probably going to move the anvil and the forge. But otherwise, I'm pretty happy with this layout. I've got some breathing room if I want to bring in a new piece of equipment or maybe upgrade to a larger plasma table. I've got room to do that. This is kind of just a starting point. Honestly, I haven't used the woodworking tools enough to really know how they should be laid out. Plus, there's kind of some unanswered questions like how do I get power to the miter saw or the table saw? It's not really convenient to drop power down from the ceiling. So we got to figure that out. The machine tools, I have a lot of experience with, and I'm pretty happy with how they're set up. It's kind of chaotic right now. The consumable tools are in these two cabinets. That stuff's going to get moved to these two cabinets, and then these are going to go away. That's going to go away. That red bench is going to go away, and then that bench there will slide in behind this one. I picked up this Chicago press brake, 6 foot, 45 ton. It does work. I didn't get a whole lot of tooling with it, so I haven't really used it yet. Leave me a comment if you want to see me convert this to hydraulics with CNC control. I've looked it over. I think it's possible. I won't say it's easy, but I think it could be done, and you'd have a whole lot more useful machine. Tell you what, if you think mechanicking takes a lot of tools, it's got nothing on machining. 3D printers are in this corner. I did get a resin printer. I talked about that a while ago. It's the Elegoo Saturn something, the new one that just came out. It's got the tilting bed. It's pretty sweet. I haven't used it a whole lot, but the things I have done with it have worked out pretty well. And the Herco VM1. A kindly viewer sent me a copy of the manuals, and I think I know how to fix it. So we're gonna get that thing powered up post-haste. I've got some jobs I wanna do with it. The front half of the shop is kind of a mess. The lift is gonna go about here, I think. Long-term projects are in the long-term project area. Hopefully, I can be a little more disciplined and there won't be as many long-term projects, at least not inside the shop. The part that I'm least happy with is the material storage, especially the steel storage. I don't know what to do. There's no good way to store steel in this shop. You know, in the US, typical steel lengths, like cold rolled and aluminum, comes in 12-foot lengths. That's like, what, 3.75 meters, something like that. Hot rolled steel is 20 foot. That's like 6 and something meters. And then tubing usually is 24 foot long, so that's 7.5 meters long. I guess I could cut that stuff in half and store everything vertically, but it just seems like you always run into a project where it would be a lot more efficient to have a longer piece. I don't know. And then the sheet steel is even worse. So I used to have a rack sitting out there where I could store the sheets vertically. That just didn't work at all. There's no way for me to load those sheets into the rack without the forklift, and I can't use the forklift to load them by myself because they just want to twist and swing, and then a lot of times you bend thinner sheets trying to tip them over like that. So I don't know what to do with that stuff. Pallet racking, maybe? I don't know where I would fit it. If anybody has any great ideas about how to store steel in as small a space as possible, let me know. And I've got, wood sheets too. I mean, I'm willing to spend some money on it or even build something. I don't know what to do. I've been in a lot of shops and I've never really seen a good solution. This stuff here is going to go, I think. I'm going to sit on it for a while, but there's only 3 options to improve the workflow in my shop. Have more space, be more organized, or have less stuff. And the last one is probably the easiest to bring to fruition. There's some pretty good stuff in here. The Miller Blue Star portable welder, I fixed that about a year ago, and I just haven't used it. That's a Van Dorn valve grinder. The valve grinder is nothing special other than it does have the attachment there for grinding rocker arms. But the Sioux valve grinding cabinet is pretty cool with the original Sioux graphics. It's in good shape too. And I've got a Black & Decker seat grinding machine, and then that's a Chinese carbide seat cutter. It's kind of cool. It's got this big magnet that holds the fixture, and it's hand powered. The problem is all the pilots are metric, and it just didn't work for the kind of stuff that I want to do. Every time I wanted to use it, I had to make my own pilots, which is not very handy. I bought the valve grinder about a year ago. I have never used it. I think in the last 10 years, I might have ground valves 3 times. So is it really worth having the stuff for it? Probably not. I've also got a Sun & Hone. It's for honing wrist pin bushings or king pin bushings. And I've got the oil tank and a bunch of mandrels. So the long ones are for doing king pins. And then I've got I don't know what you call them, the little things you use for truing up the stones. My dad gave that to me, I don't know, 6 years ago. I've never used it. Do I really need it? Probably not. There's a 10-ton Blackhawk floor jack. It's in perfect shape, but I only use it about maybe once a year, and it takes up a lot of space. That's a bunch of extra hand tools that I had in a box. Max tore the box apart trying to get a mouse, but I'll probably never use this stuff. I'll probably just donate it to the high school. They've got an ag program. I'm sure they could use some extra tools. I believe at one point I had 8 vices, so I'm thinning the herd there. And then I have a thing about hand carry toolboxes. I never use them, but yet I keep acquiring them. I probably had a dozen at one point. This is a Kennedy cantilever toolbox, brand new. They don't even make these anymore. I'll probably keep that one, but the rest of them are going to go. Yeah, when's the last time I used that engine support bar? Couldn't tell you. Don't need a high lift jack. There's a tumbler there that I've never used. Bunch of electric motors that I'll probably never use. 6-liter Power Stroke parts that I hope to never use. Outside is a total disaster. That's going to be the next project. None of this stuff needs to come back inside, as far as I'm concerned. This is all trash. It's going to the landfill. Counting the full ones, I had 38 5-gallon buckets. That's some engine parts I'm going to give to my neighbor. More shelving. That's a whole tote full of electrical wire. This is waste coolant and some oil. I've got some totes I'm going to put that stuff into. The waste oil tank is probably not coming back inside. I really don't need to make space in my heated shop for waste oil. This stuff's all scrap metal. I got a buyer for that lift. There's the new one that's coming in. And the do-all bandsaw. I bought that about a year ago. I thought I would use it, but I never even hooked it up to power. And I just don't foresee that happening. I think it needs a new home. I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but the audio is totally different. There's a ton of echo. And with the door closed, it's going to be brutal. We might have to add some sound panels or something. Anyway, thanks for watching, assuming that anybody is still watching. This has been exhausting, both physically and mentally. It's just not a lot of fun, which is why I put it off for so long. And I wasn't going to record this process, but I had so many people ask for shop organization videos. It's like some kind of weird internet fetish, I guess. Anyway, this is my lame attempt at it. There's a lot more work to do. I've got to recover some horizontal surfaces, organize some drawers. Everything needs to be labeled. But there's only so far that I'm going to go. This is not a factory. There's no 6S, Kaizen, any of that BS. That doesn't apply here. It's a one-man shop. You know, we can very quickly reach a point of diminishing returns when it comes to shop organization. Anyway, thanks for watching.